Thank you, Dr. Shah, respected panelists and other participants of this program. And first of all, my sincere gratitude to Pranab. I think it was almost 24 years since we have met, and I'm so happy that I have been invited. So coming to the topic, we have to have a look at Kerala's experience on decentralization-led governance for climate resilience. And before I start, I would put a few observations regarding climate resilience and the debate which is going on across the globe regarding climate change. As far as climate change is concerned, the issue has been proven by science, and all our policy measures are directed towards addressing various nuances of climate change. And climate change has become an overarching issue that would decide the course of policy action. India is also a signatory in that process, and we are closely observing the Sustainable Development Goals. We have developed our own categories of goals, and we have devised mechanisms to implement the Sustainable Development Goals at the local level. But there are a few issues. Basically, when we talk about climate change and accomplishing resilience, we are talking about mitigation of climate change. And mitigation basically is an issue which can be handled globally, since India's contribution to carbon emission is relatively low when compared to the legacy emitters. And this comes up with the argument that whether the rural community should be given unnecessary emphasis and orientation to mitigation. What is going to be the contribution of rural India to mitigation or carbon emission? And what responsibility is with the rural Indian community for mitigating carbon emission? So I think that fundamental question will have to be answered. Rather, I think in the context of climate change, we have to concentrate more on adaptation to protect people from the perils of climate change, to provide them with livelihood security, empowerment, and ever so many other necessities required by the rural communities. In fact, our deliberation on climate change and our action plan on climate change is mostly oriented towards mitigation with due emphasis, on adaptation with due emphasis on mitigation. In fact, the 73rd and 74th Amendment of the Constitution of India provides us with ample scope for intervening in any segment of human activity at the grassroots level, particularly in the rural sector, which is related to climate change. Right from agriculture to public distribution system, 29 items have been listed, and all these items are going to be impacted by climate change. And naturally, the local governments have got responsibility, and they can proactively intervene in issues related to climate change. So climate change basically impacts humans who are at the lower rungs of the society, and all these activities would be impacted by climate change. So then how can decentralization be instrumental in dealing with the issues of climate change? How can decentralization contribute to climate change and climate resilience? In fact, decentralization envisaged in the 73rd and 74th Amendments calls for empowerment of the states and its local government systems. So local governments have to be given adequate funds, they have to be given powers, and also they have to be given the officials and functionaries to implement various programs. So Kerala, for that matter, has gone much ahead of other states, utilizing the provisions of the 73rd and 74th Amendment. This decentralization, as I told you, the 73rd and 74th Amendment gives you ample scope for intervention by the local governments. But whether the local governments have been empowered adequately to address these issues and other related issues is a big question. In Kerala, we had tried to make use of the provisions of the 73rd and 74th Amendment we had made Grama Sabhas mandatory, and all the deliberations that come up in the Grama Sabhas could be translated into projects by officials of the department who have been transferred to various tiers of the local governments. An officer in the agriculture department would be under the direct control of the Grama Panchayat. An animal husbandry expert, a vet, would be under the direct control of the Grama Panchayat, and his immediate officer at the highest level of the next hierarchy level would be under the block Panchayat, and the district level officer would be under the district Panchayat. So this kind of devolution has been effected, and adequate money also has been given to the local governments. So we give as much as 30% of our total plan funds to the local government. It is deducted at the source. The finance minister, during his presentation of the budget, declares the amount of money that would be given to the local governments. So this is a prerequisite. What I wanted to drive home is, unless this prerequisite is met, intervention by local governments, not only in climate change, in any matter, in any issue for that matter, would not happen at all. So it is in this, with this pretext, I try to explain the experiments by state of Kerala in decentralization-led climate resilience or climate governance. Basically, this paradigm is very important. You have to have a well-orchestrated system of decentralized planning. The local governments should have adequate resources. On an average, a Grama Panchayat in Kerala gets as much as 4 crores rupees every year at their disposal for spending on various aspects of rural development and services, and also in the productive sector. So that is a prerequisite. And secondly, there is a system of converting the aspirations of the people to projects and plans. And there is a system of governance to monitor the progress of implementation of these functions. And all these functions are computerized. And you can monitor the progress of these functions at any level. So these prerequisites or this framework enables the local governments to intervene in any matter of importance. So basically, climate change is something which has impacted Kerala in a huge way. We became aware of the importance of climate change and the importance of responses to climate change with the devastating floods in 2018 and 2019. And with these floods affecting almost about 10 out of the 14 districts in Kerala, there has been an immediate response from the government to activate civic organizations, local governments, etc., with various institutional mechanisms. We formulated civic groups, rapid response teams, youth brigade, etc., at the Grama Panchayat level to combat various problems that would come as part of disasters. So in fact, later on, we crystallized all these organizations into formal organizations which were attached to the local governments. Basically, each Grama Panchayat was asked to prepare a disaster management plan and also a local climate action plan. And training were given to the functionaries of the local governments and also the leadership of the local governments to formulate local action plan and local disaster plan. And that was done at the behest of the Disaster Management Authority, research organizations, civic organizations, people science movements, political leadership. Everyone came together to formulate these plans at the local level. So these disaster management plans are substantially researched documents which are available with the local governments. And you can see all the possibilities of disasters. And the data has been mostly provided by the Disaster Management Authority. The vulnerability of each location is very scientifically recorded in these documents. And the possibilities of harnessing people and other resources in the event of a disaster is also outlined. All what you have to do is to make it happen. So when a disaster comes, you can activate these groups and reach out to the people, particularly in remote areas and all that, and engage them in the rescue operations. And also you can give warning signals. Take the example of Alleppey. Alleppey is a place which is below sea level and floods are frequent. And every year there would be 2-3 occasions or 2-3 instances of flood. And whenever there is a signal that there would be flooding situation, then these people can move out of their respective location and go to a shelter home. And the shelter home have been built by the district panchayat. Local bodies also can convert schools and other public places to shelter homes. And of late, the climate action plan involved building up maybe raised platforms or maybe sanctioning new housing schemes to be built on pillars, etc., etc. Any kind of such interventions can be mooted by the local governments to combat. That is just an example. So likewise, we have got the hilly terrain, particularly the Western Ghats. If there is a probability of landslide, mudslide, when there are huge mudslides which are unexpected, we won't be able to do anything. It depends on the scale and also the expectations, which we may not be able to predict at some point of time. But whenever there are usual warning signals, maybe people can be evacuated. So that is why I said adaptation is the most important thing. So you should safeguard the livelihoods of people. You should make awareness among the people that you are liable to be or you are likely to be affected by a disaster, and you have to save their lives and as well as their assets and other properties. So we give emphasis on this. So in fact, this local government, local climate action plan and the disaster management plan have been formulated by the local governments and that are being reviewed by the state disaster management authority, the district planning committee, and also various levels of review monitoring samitis that we have at different levels. So this is the framework, this is the organizational framework of disaster management, decentralized disaster management and climate change action in Kerala. So now I would just present before you a tool that has been developed by the government of Kerala to track climate change action by local governments. See, I told you about the framework. That framework enables the local governments to formulate plans worth 3 to 4 crores of rupees every year. Plan is nothing but a compilation of projects. So projects in different sectors would be formulated by the local government. Say, for example, in agriculture or allied sectors, in animal husbandry, fisheries, we have insisted, the state planning board has insisted that you should be spending at least 30% of your plan funds in the productive sector with a view to improve productivity, with a view to increase agriculture production. But on the other side, panchayats would be mostly interested in infrastructure development. We insist that panchayat should not spend more than 30% in the infrastructure development. Otherwise, unnecessarily money will be spent on constructions which are not going to be productive. So there are broader guidelines with regard to plan formulation. And the local governments have to observe these guidelines very strictly because devolution of funds is monitored by a management information system. And this management information system automatically prevents local governments to spend more than what has been stipulated or what is stipulated by the state planning board. So there is a connection. I think this is a very long process. I do not want to describe the nuances of this process in this forum. So this is the framework in which the local governments work. So in a nutshell, if you want to have a climate action plan, if you have individual projects, just like what I had described in the context of Alleppey and other places, the local governments can spend money. So spending money is a very important factor as far as the disaster management or climate action resilience is, climate governance is concerned. So unless you have opportunities to spend money, climate resilience or climate governance at the local government, the local level is not going to be possible. So you want to find out whether a local body has actually spent money on climate change. You want to find out whether a local body has envisaged action on climate resilience. You want to find out whether the local body has got any vision regarding a future climate action plan. And also you want to find out whether the projects formulated by the local governments are adequate enough to address various issues related to climate change. So these three aspects have to be measured. So the tool which we have developed would be able to find out whether a local government, for that matter, any government for that matter, whether they are truthful to the cause of climate change action. So in fact, this tool is called the Disaster Risk Management and climate action tool, and shortly called DCAT. So this DCAT tool, I would just explain the process by which this climate action is tracked or monitored using this tool. There are so many other trackers and tools available by US and so many other agencies, but this is an improvised version getting inputs from many of such trackers. This is a qualitative as well as quantitative assessment is possible through this tool. What we do is we try to to start with, as a first step, we try to analyze the extent of vulnerability of a region, of a local body. So what exactly is the vulnerability with regard to climate parameters? What exactly has been the rainfall? What exactly has been the extreme temperature? Whether there has been incidents of landslide, whether there has been incidents of other climate extremities. So the legacy databases which can be obtained from the IMD and also the disaster management agency would be provided at the Grama Panchayat level, and that would give you an index of vulnerability, climate vulnerability. So at the same time, you would also measure the vulnerability to disasters. So for example, possibility of a landslide. If the panchayat, the major portion of that panchayat is having a higher slope of land, then there is a likelihood that there could be more landslides, there could be more erosion, there could be more floods, so and so. So there is also a possibility of measuring the extent of disaster proneness of the Grama Panchayat, which would be indicated by disaster proneness index. So we get two measures. First one, the climate vulnerability measure, and also the disaster proneness measure. And these two measures would be combined with another index, the responsiveness of the government, particularly the local governance. What exactly has been the intervention by the government, by the local government, and what has been the response in the governance system. So how do we measure the governance system's response to climate change? We will go through the various projects formulated by the local governments, and we will find out whether these projects have actually addressed various issues listed by experts while calculating the climate variance, climate vulnerability index and the disaster proneness index. Take the example of, say, climate change. There is an instance of drought. So what the Grama Panchayat has envisaged in its annual plan or in the 5-year plan or in maybe in the biannual plan to address the issue of water scarcity. See, water scarcity is addressed through, say for example, by a lift irrigation program to cater to that particular area. Then this Grama Panchayat would be getting a positive score. A weightage also has been given to each of these score or each of this item by experts. So we, as a composite index is developed based on these three indicators, and based on that, each local body has been given a score, which would tell you, just like our GDP or any other indicator, tell you the disaster preparedness, the climate responsiveness of the local governments. So this would be a very effective tool to find out the extent of devolution of funds. Say, for example, this particular project came into being when there was the Rebuild Kerala initiative funded by the World Bank. So the World Bank wanted to give the local governments an incentive system, to introduce an incentive system. They wanted to help the local governments. They wanted to give more money to those local governments who had earnestly taken up activities to combat climate change. So how will you measure this? So it was in that context, this tool was particularly developed and used. And this tool is being used now to provide them with incentives. So if the local body, every year, this index would be calculated, and based on this index, money would be given from that project. So now we have adopted this particular index for devolution of money by the state government as well. So we are trying to find out whether money could be done based on, not only based on the other parameters of the Finance Commission, State Finance Commission, we are trying to link devolution of funds by linking the performance with the index values. So this is how we have tried to scientifically address the issue of decentralized climate governance. I will just point out a few parameters which we have taken. So for example, in climate, the relevance of that local body with respect to climate responsiveness. See, we have considered income, we have considered livelihood disparities, food and nutrition security, land use and land cover. All these data sets are available from different agencies. From the Department of Economics and Statistics, many of these data sets would be available. In cases where you don't have data, access to data, you may have to conduct maybe your own surveys to find out the indicators which can be used in this tool. So likewise, disaster relevance, you have to find out the disaster preparedness. How much is the local body prepared to face disasters, disaster response, disaster recovery mechanisms and structures which have been built by the local body from time to time. And in governance, there are so many things, whether the local body has involved itself in creating awareness among the citizens regarding climate change, whether they have come up with regulations with regard to, say, for example, building rules. Say, this in certain ecologically fragile areas, they are not supposed to permit people to build their houses and commercial installations. So whether they have observed those things and maybe various other interventions, how they have documented the whole process of biodiversity, historical data on disasters. So many indicators have been factored in to find out this, to calculate this tool. So based on all these indicators, a composite score is estimated, and we use it for further funding of the local governments. In fact, I would put one more, to conclude, I would like to emphasize that this would not happen unless you have integration of different agencies at the local governments. So very shallow observations on climate change is not going to make any particular effect on, particularly on adaptation. So mitigation, okay, mitigation maybe, I don't know to what extent we would be able to mitigate climate change if you reduce fertilizers, if you reduce irrigation water, etc., that has to be still estimated. I don't know whether there is any realistic estimation of what is going to be the contribution of small and marginal farmers in carbon emission. I doubt we do not contribute much to carbon emission that way. So that onus should be mostly on the great contributors for carbon emission, not the poor farmers who are trying to make their living out of maybe 1 or 2 acres of land. But good or bad, there has to be different agencies coming together, and they have to put their hands together, put their heads together. They have to share their resources, and above all, there has to be a robust system of decentralized governance which would enable the people, the grassroots level institutions to proactively involve in the process of adaptation as well as mitigation. So thank you very much for giving this opportunity.